If there's ever been a battle that deserved to be remembered, but somehow slipped through the cracks of history, it's the Battle of Khotyn, also known as Chocim, fought on November 11, 1673. Most people today have never even heard of it, which is a shame because what happened there wasn't just another victory. It was the moment when a broken nation, the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth, clawed its way back from humiliation and near collapse, and in one decisive strike obliterated one of the most feared armies on earth. Welcome to Heroic History, where we bring forgotten battles and untold stories of strategy, courage, and survival back to life every single day. If you love military history and stories of nations defying the odds, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because today we're uncovering one of the greatest forgotten victories in European history. Just a year earlier, in 1672, things couldn't have looked worse for the Commonwealth. The mighty Ottoman Empire had invaded, captured the powerful fortress of Kamieniec Podolski, and forced the Poles into signing what was probably the most humiliating treaty in their history, the Treaty of Buchach. That treaty was a national nightmare. Poland-Lithuania agreed to cede the province of Podolia, a rich agricultural heartland, and to pay annual tribute to the Ottoman Sultan, a proud European kingdom reduced to a tributary state, forced to send gold to Istanbul each year as a sign of submission. Financially, the Commonwealth was bankrupt. Politically, it was fractured. The nobility, the Szlachta, were squabbling among themselves, while the treasury was empty and the army demoralized. The once mighty realm that had held its own against Sweden, Russia, and the Cossacks now seemed ready to fall apart. And then came John Sobieski, the man who refused to let it die. At the time, Sobieski wasn't yet king. He was the Grand Hetman of the crown, basically the top military commander. He was a soldier's soldier, brave, deeply intelligent, and surprisingly modern in how he thought about war. When he took command, the Commonwealth wasn't looking for glory. They were just trying to survive. But Sobieski saw something no one else did. The Ottomans, despite their numbers and prestige, had weaknesses, and he intended to strike at them when they least expected it. Chocim 1673 wasn't planned as a grand conquest. It was supposed to be a retaliatory expedition, maybe a limited counterattack, a way to regain some honor after Buchach. But under Sobieski's hand, it became something far greater. Through careful preparation, brilliant logistics, and a deep understanding of both his own men and his enemies, Sobieski turned what should have been a defensive campaign into one of the most lopsided victories of the 17th century. Let's talk about the scale of what happened, because the raw data itself is staggering. Sobieski led a force of around 29,000 to 30,000 men, a modest army by European standards at the time. His troops included not just the legendary winged hussars, but also modernized infantry and artillery trained along western lines. They weren't the largest army in the field, but they were disciplined, well-led, and most importantly, motivated. Facing them was an Ottoman army estimated at about 35,000 strong under the command of Hussein Pasha. These were not amateurs. The force included elite janissaries, Sipahi heavy cavalry, Tatar auxiliaries, and contingents from the vassal states of Moldavia and Wallachia. From the outside, the Ottomans held every advantage: manpower, fortifications, and experience in siege warfare. But when the battle was over, the results were nothing short of catastrophic for the Ottoman Empire. Out of roughly 35,000 soldiers, somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 were killed, wounded, or captured. That means anywhere from 2-3 to nearly 90% of their force was wiped out. By comparison, Sobieski's men suffered only about 2,000 casualties, an almost unbelievable 10-1 or even 15.1 casualty ratio. It was, as some historians have called it, a systematic destruction. It's one of those rare historical moments when all the advantages, speed, weather, morale, leadership, align perfectly in one direction. It sounded almost like a miracle. But miracles don't just happen. How did Sobieski make it possible? To understand that, we need to look back at how bad that Treaty of Buchach actually was. Signed in October 1672, the treaty forced the Commonwealth to accept humiliating terms that effectively downgraded it to a vassal of the Ottoman Empire. referred to in documents as the Sublime Porte. Poland had to cede the entire Podolian voivodeship, a vital province centered around Kamieniec Podolski, to Ottoman control. On top of that, it had to give up the Bratslav region and the southern part of Kiev province to the so-called Cossack Hetmanate under Petro Doroshenko, who was aligned with the Ottomans. And as if losing territory weren't enough, the Commonwealth was forced to pay an annual tribute of 22,000 ducats to the Ottomans. Imagine the humiliation, a once great European power now paying money to the very empire that had ravaged its lands. The treaty wasn't just a setback, it was a declaration that the Commonwealth had lost its independence in both spirit and substance. The treaty cut deep into the Commonwealth's pride and political stability. Inside the Commonwealth, the nobility, called the Slakta, was divided into bitter factions, each more interested in their own influence than in the survival of the nation itself. And right in the middle of this storm stood John Sobieski, the Grand Hetman of the Crown, a man respected by soldiers but distrusted by many politicians. The political landscape was chaotic. Sobieski's relationship with King Michał Korybut Wiśniowiecki was strained, to say the least. He was both the king's most capable general and his most formidable rival. Financing an army in such circumstances seemed almost impossible. Treasury coffers were empty, morale was shattered, and the peasants were exhausted from years of warfare. Yet somehow Sobieski was expected to restore national dignity after the disaster at Buchach. But how did Sobieski pull it off? The answer lies in the quiet months between 1672 and 1673, a kind of Cold War period where Sobieski carefully rebuilt what was left of the Commonwealth's military strength. Sobieski understood that Poland's traditional cavalry alone, even the famed winged hussars, couldn't win modern wars. So he reorganized the army, blending the shock power of the hussars with Western-style infantry and artillery. It was a hybrid force, fast, adaptable, and disciplined. The numbers themselves tell you just how precarious things were. Still, that 30,000 would become one of the most formidable fighting forces in Eastern Europe. How did he fund it? Ironically, with help from the Ottomans themselves, at least indirectly. A letter from the Grand Vizier demanding Poland fulfill the humiliating Buchach's obligations became Sobieski's rallying cry. He used it to shame the Sejm, the Polish parliament, into approving new taxes to fund the war effort. The message was clear: pay tribute to the Sultan or pay for your own defense. The Sejm chose the latter. Sobieski's genius didn't stop at raising troops. His logistical planning was nothing short of masterful. He moved his army using lesser-known routes, concealing his intentions from Ottoman scouts. When the Polish forces reached the Dniester River, the enemy had little idea they were even coming, and the timing brilliant. Sobieski launched his campaign in November, deep into the cold season when most armies were hunkering down for winter. No one expected an assault in those conditions. That element of surprise became his silent ally. On paper, the Ottoman army looked unstoppable. They had about 35,000 men, a mix of battle-hardened janissaries, elite Sipahi cavalry, Tatar horsemen, and additional troops from their vassal states of Moldavia and Wallachia. To most observers, it seemed like an overwhelming force. But there was a hidden problem. The janissaries, once the empire's elite corps, had grown conservative and resistant to change. More interested in preserving their privileges than adapting to new tactics, the Sipahi cavalry, who were granted land in exchange for military service, often cared more about protecting their estates than obeying distant orders from Istanbul. Then there were the Tatar horsemen from Crimea, fierce fighters, but semi-independent allies who joined Ottoman campaigns mainly for loot and influence, not out of loyalty to the Sultan. Finally, the Wallachian and Moldavian contingents were troops from vassal states. They fought because they were obligated to, not because they wanted to. Put all that together, and you get an army that is powerful in size, but weak in unity. Each group followed its own commander, spoke its own language, and had its own reason for being there. It was a coalition held together by the prestige of the Ottoman name, rather than true cohesion. Sobieski's army, by contrast, was smaller, roughly 30,000 strong, including the famed Polish winged hussars, well-trained Western-style infantry, and a compact but effective artillery corps. But what they lacked in size they more than made up for in discipline and coordination. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth troops fought as a cohesive body guided by a single strategic vision, Sobieski's. Now let's look at where it all happened. The fortress of Chocim sat atop a steep plateau overlooking the Dniester River, controlling one of the main routes between Central Europe and the Balkans, a natural barrier and a critical trade route in Eastern Europe. Whoever controlled Chocim could essentially choke or open access to the Dniester, which meant controlling movement, trade, and the regional balance of power. Ottoman commander Husein Pasha believed his position was almost impregnable. His army fortified itself behind a network of old trenches and earthen ramparts, some dating all the way back to the 1621 Battle of Chocim, when Polish and Ottoman forces had clashed before. He had 35,000 men, high ground and solid defenses. In theory, that should have been enough. But then came the one factor that nobody could control: the weather. The date was November 11th, 1673. The air was freezing, the ground slick with frost and slush. The battlefield had turned into what eyewitnesses described as frozen mud, a nightmare for cavalry, especially the light horsemen like the Tartars and Sipahis, who relied on speed and maneuverability. Their horses slipped, their charges lost momentum, and their formations fell into disarray. Sobieski, ever the opportunist, saw this not as an obstacle, but as an opening. The same mud that bogged down the Ottomans worked in his favor. The earthen walls of the Ottoman camp softened under the frost, weakening the defensive positions they trusted so deeply. And while Husein Pasha hunkered down, expecting to repel another siege, Sobieski planned something far bolder: a full-scale offensive in winter, a time when most European armies had long since gone into their seasonal dormancy. November 9th, after 2 grueling days of marching through endless mud and frost, the Polish-Lithuanian army finally came within sight of the Ottoman defenses. Imagine tens of thousands of men and horses slogging through knee-deep muck, their armor caked in dirt, the wind cutting across the plains of Podolia. When they finally stopped, they were just half a cannon's shot, maybe 500 to 600 yards from the enemy camp. Ahead of them lay the fortress lines of Chocim, earthen walls, ditches, and wooden palisades left over from older battles, reinforced by fresh Ottoman labor. Inside were some 35,000 soldiers, Janissaries, Sipahi cavalry, Tartars, and troops from Moldavia and Wallachia. It looked like an unbreakable fortress. Sobieski sent out scouts and light cavalry to probe the defenses, hoping to draw the Ottomans out into open ground. He needed them away from their walls, where his cavalry could fight on equal terms. But Husein Pasha, the Ottoman commander, wasn't biting. He stayed behind his fortifications, confident in his numbers and in the cold weather that he thought would work against the Poles. So the first day passed with only skirmishes and artillery exchanges, a deadly game of waiting in the freezing mud. By the next morning, Sobieski was done waiting. He knew every hour that passed gave the Ottomans more time to strengthen their positions. He ordered his artillery commander, General Marcin Konski, to open fire. The ground shook. Polish cannons hurled iron balls into the Ottoman camp, smashing through wooden barricades and tearing apart tents. Black smoke drifted across the field. When the shelling eased, Sobieski sent in a probing infantry attack just to test the defenses. The result was brutal. The Poles were pushed back, losing men. But that short, bloody clash gave them exactly what they needed. It showed Sobieski where the weak points were, the sections of the Ottoman trench line that could be breached. That night, while the Ottomans believed the Poles were licking their wounds, Sobieski's engineers and soldiers were hard at work. In temperatures well below freezing, with sleet and snow whipping at their faces, they crept forward and built new artillery emplacements barely 200 meters from the enemy line, about the length of 2 football fields. They worked silently, driving stakes and hauling cannon through mud turned to ice. And here's where nature itself started fighting for Sobieski. The sudden cold snap combined with icy rain and wind hit the Ottoman troops hard. Many of them, especially the contingents from warmer climates like Wallachia and Moldavia, weren't prepared for the brutal Eastern European weather. The biting wind cut through their thin tents. Frost formed on their armor. By midnight, Entire sections of the trenches were left unmanned as soldiers abandoned their posts in search of warmth. Sobieski noticed, and he knew this was his moment. Before dawn, under a pale grey sky, the Polish camp came alive. Orders were whispered from line to line. The men tightened their straps, checked their flints, and formed ranks in the biting cold. Sobieski mounted his horse, wrapped in a fur-lined cloak, and gave the signal. Our dawn assault exploited the dense fog and poor visibility, confusing the Ottoman sentries and masking Polish movements. Sobieski knew his men, veterans hardened by years of defending their homeland, could keep discipline under miserable conditions. The silence broke with thunder. Polish cannons erupted once again, blasting the Ottoman lines at point-blank range. When the smoke cleared, the infantry advanced, muskets in one hand, axes in the other. They charged across the frozen mud, cutting down the scattered defenders who had survived the night. Sobieski himself led the dragoon regiments forward, shouting orders as musket fire flashed around him. The Janissaries, once the terror of Europe, tried to regroup, but they were caught off guard, cold, exhausted, and surrounded by chaos. The Polish infantry stormed the first line of trenches and started tearing down the earthen ramparts with their axes. The ditches that had once protected the Ottoman camp now became bridges for the next phase of the assault, and then came the sound every Ottoman soldier dreaded, the thunder of hooves. Through the early morning mist they appeared, the Husaria, the legendary Polish winged hussars. Their armor gleamed faintly in the grey light. The great wings mounted behind their saddles rustled with the motion of their gallop. To many, they must have looked like avenging angels descending upon the camp. They hit the Ottoman lines like a hammer. The Janissaries, already disorganized, were crushed. The once proud camp turned into a nightmare of confusion. Men screaming, horses bolting, smoke and snow swirling together. Sobieski's cavalry didn't stop. They drove deep into the heart of the Ottoman camp, cutting down anyone who resisted. But the real disaster for the Ottomans came when they tried to retreat. Hussein Pasha, the Ottoman commander, hadn't prepared for a fallback. When the front lines broke, panic spread faster than orders could. Thousands of soldiers rushed toward the pontoon bridges over the Dniester River, the only escape route. Under the crushing weight of men, horses, and wagons, the bridges began to sway, then splinter, and then they collapsed. What followed was chaos. Thousands of men plunged into the icy water. Many drowned under the weight of their own armor. Others were cut down by pursuing cavalry. Polish artillery crews, seizing the moment, aimed their guns at the choke points, bridges, gates, crossings, and fired into the retreating masses. The Ottoman camp turned into what witnesses later described as a frozen slaughterhouse. Historians often point to Chocim as the moment where Sobieski's brilliance as a commander became undeniable. His innovations weren't random strokes of luck. They were calculated, deliberate, and rooted in experience. Sobieski had taken the best of Western-style firepower, muskets and artillery, and blended it with the unmatched shock of Polish heavy cavalry. The result was devastation. By the end of the day, somewhere between 20,000 and 30,000 Ottoman soldiers lay dead, wounded, or drowned. The Polish-Lithuanian forces, by comparison, lost barely 2,000 men. Timing, as they say, is everything. Just weeks earlier, King Michał Korybut-Wiśniowiecki had died, leaving the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth without a monarch. The nobility, the szlachta, were in Warsaw debating who would lead next. Then the news arrived, a stunning military victory. If the Treaty of Buchach had symbolized the Pax Ottomana, a humiliating peace imposed through submission, then the Battle of Chocim tore that illusion to pieces. Within a single year of being forced to sign away vast tracts of Ukrainian land and pay annual tribute to the Sultan, the Commonwealth struck back and annihilated the very army that had once dictated those terms. For the Commonwealth, it was a rebirth. Imagine the scene in Warsaw when the couriers arrived, breathless, frostbitten, carrying the royal banners of victory. The delegates, who only days before had been mired in despair, suddenly found themselves facing a different kind of silence, the stunned kind that follows after hearing something miraculous. This was the same nation that had been written off by foreign diplomats as finished, bankrupt, politically broken, and yet, under Sobieski, It had achieved what no power in Europe had done in years. It had defeated the Ottomans head-on. The news spread like wildfire across the Commonwealth. Peasants and nobles alike felt something they hadn't felt in years: pride. And inside the election hall, the mood flipped overnight. The delegates who'd been divided, unsure, even cynical about their nation's future, suddenly found themselves united by awe. Almost instantly, public opinion swung behind one man, John Sobieski, the Grand Hetman, the architect of that miraculous victory. Chocim became, in a way, the greatest job interview in European history. Just 2 days after the battle on November 13, 1673, Sobieski was elected king. But the shockwaves didn't stop there. For the Ottoman Empire, Chocim was a strategic disaster. The Janissaries' aura of invincibility cracked. Losing that many men sent a chilling message across the Danube. The empire could no longer protect its own vassals. Overnight, Ottoman control over Moldavia and Wallachia, once held by fear and prestige, began to wobble, and their momentum towards Central Europe ground to a halt. For several years after that bloody November, the empire halted its major invasions into the region. That pause, which lasted from 1673 to 1676, gave Sobieski precious time to consolidate his throne, rebuild the Commonwealth's finances, and reorganize its defenses. And for the first time in a generation, the Polish-Lithuanian frontier along the Dniester felt stable. Chocim didn't end the war entirely. Fighting would continue until 1676, but it did stop the Ottoman tide from sweeping deeper into Europe. And yet, strangely enough, very few people outside Eastern Europe remember Chocim today. By every measure, it should have been the moment Sobieski earned his title as the savior of Europe. After all, it was Chocim, not Vienna, that first stopped the Ottoman advance and saved the Commonwealth from humiliation. But in the grand sweep of European history, Chocim got overshadowed. 10 years later came Vienna, a larger, more spectacular confrontation where Sobieski led a coalition of Western powers in a dramatic crusade against the Turks. Vienna had all the elements that captured Western imagination: papal blessings, imperial banners, and the salvation of the Habsburg capital. Chocim, by contrast, was seen as a local Polish affair, a sovereign defense, not a holy war. Still, if you look at it clearly, Chocim was the real turning point, the foundation for everything that came after. Jan Sobieski proved that tactical brilliance, national pride, and timing could overcome even the might of an empire. He showed that the Commonwealth still had life, still had courage, and still had the ability to stand as Europe's shield against the East. Without Chocim, there might never have been a Vienna. Without Chocim, Sobieski might never have become king. And without that early frost-bitten victory by the Dniester River, the story of Europe's defense in the 17th century might have looked very different. Chocim deserves to be remembered not just as a battle, but as a moment when one man's vision turned despair into destiny. If you enjoyed this story and want more forgotten battles brought back to life, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heroic History, where we uncover the strategies, heroes, and turning points that shaped our world. And tell us in the comments which forgotten victory do you think deserves to be remembered next. Thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow.